Okay, good afternoon all. If I could ask that all of you please take your seats. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So we will now be kicking off our Topic 2 discussion, and similar to how we had our Topic 1, we'll be kicking it off with comments from a panel of individuals living with chronic pain, and then we'll go back into that large facilitated dialogue format and then ask for folks in the audience and on the web to add to the questions that we're asking. Topic 2 will really focus on management approaches to chronic pain. So we'll be asking all of you to share what you're currently doing to help manage your pain, how well your chronic pain is managed, what are some of the most significant downsides to your current treatments, and how those downsides may affect your daily life. And then we'll be spending a significant amount of time hearing from all of you about the challenges or barriers to accessing or using medical treatments for chronic pain that you've encountered or you will encounter. And we spoke to some of this already in the morning, and so we're going to ask that you share some more experiences. And we'll wrap up with specific things that you may look for in an ideal treatment for your chronic pain. I do want to make a couple of housekeeping announcements before we get started. One is we have somewhat of a fix for our technical issue that we were having. We were able to get an in-room projector. The pro is this should work and be consistent. The con is we won't be able to see it on the side screens, or for our panelists up here, you won't be able to see it on the televisions, but this should work. The second announcement that I'd like to make is we were aware that some pamphlets and information may have been provided outside. I do want to let you know that we do ask that that does not happen at patient-focused drug development meetings and FDA public meetings, and that information is not FDA sponsored or FDA endorsed. With that, I would like to ask our Topic 2 panelists to speak about their perspectives. And first we have Lindsay.
No pressure, right after lunch. It's great. As she said, my name is Lindsay, and I am 33 years old. And basically every day the back of my head feels like it's burning. In 2012, I was involved in a car accident and left with chronic head pain and a mild traumatic brain injury. Since that time, I've gone on to have 2 additional concussions. They always forget to tell you that after you have one, it is very easy to get more. So a lot of my treatments, the side effects of medicines versus the effects of having multiple brain injuries. I just feel like, in my journey, as so many other here, when I started, I kind of started on all the normal drugs they do, the anticonvulsants, the depression medications, and those things did not work, or they left me with such harsh side effects, like just feeling sedated, weight gain, not being able to concentrate at all, that I had to stop them. In 2014, my pain decided to increase, and there's a lot of reasons behind that, but one of them is my brain was under strain for a couple of years with chronic pain. In 2015, I had a procedure called radiofrequency ablation and was left with life-changing complications from that. So I don't want to debunk the myth that these things are not without risk and side effects, because everything that we try to do in chronic pain, we are managing those 2 together. I also want to mention that it is not one size fits all. Yes, as a young woman who is athletic, I do not process medications the same way as someone else does. If I get 4 hours of relief, I'm extremely excited. I do not ever get 6 hours of relief. For me, the reason why I'm kind of able to sit here today and talk to you is through ketamine. I have ketamine infusions every 8 weeks, at my pain specialist, and I spend 2 days, 4 hours each infusion having ketamine. The idea behind it is that ketamine resets the NMDA receptors in your brain. For me, I decided to do this after that procedure had gone wrong. I had tried facet injections. I had tried trigger point injections. I had tried increased opioids, and none of it really worked. I faced this really daunting reality that I had to figure something out, like ketamine, and literally throw a Hail Mary, or I was going to be spending my life on my mother's couch. I decided to try ketamine, and for me, it is what kind of keeps me going each and every day. I'm at a clinic where they've been doing it for probably 10 years, and I know that there's also a lot of chronic pain patients who are also doing this throughout the country as well. Let me see what else I got. I am affected by kind of the stigma that is kind of going on right now in chronic pain. I can tell you that after the procedure went wrong, there was a lot of blaming, and there wasn't anyone sitting there and saying, how can we help her? How can we make her get better? Another thing we don't really talk about is what chronic pain does over time, and the fact that something that can be kind of mild for somebody else can have months and months of impact on each and every one of us. Last year, I live in Atlanta, and I was in Atlanta traffic, and somebody just plowed into me, back of my car. And so my pain went up, obviously. I got another concussion. And in those moments, my pain physician at the time decided that he wanted me to go back on high-dose morphine for weeks, and I said no. Please say I'm not against opioids at all. I do take one every day. It starts with an N, and it's very helpful for managing the day-to-day chronic pain. But for me, it really was that morphine affected my judgment, and it made me feel numb. I was really surprised to find out that when I decided to push back, instead of them dealing with the situation, I was discharged. I want to say that for me, it was actually a really good thing, because I now have a fantastic pain specialist who I think cares and is trying a lot of just different things, and my quality of life has gone up, significantly. One of the things that I kind of stand out about is that I am able to hold down a full-time job as a marketing manager, and I realize that that is not the reality of most people here. I don't even want to think about what my life would be like without having ketamine infusions. Also, because I do have the full-time job, I have the premium health insurance, so I can afford a lot of the drugs, or have access to a lot of the drugs that many of you do not have access to. I can also afford things like acupuncture, chiropractor, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, you name it, and those are things that are off limits for a lot of people. I think that if the FDA, you're going to walk away from this and being like, what can we do, short-term and long-term? I think short-term, one thing that you can really do is to look at the drugs that are already out and see if they could have a use again. Instead of having to spend millions and billions of dollars creating new drugs, looking at things like ketamine that have been around for so long, but maybe Big Pharma doesn't want to do clinical trials on them because it's a generic drug and they can't make up the money that they spent on the type of exploration. Something else I would say is that I really like to see the government agencies to talk to one another. I think that there's a lack of communication that has definitely impacted me as well. And just stop and say, if this was my daughter, if this was my spouse, if this was my child, maybe it is worth extending and working together as agencies to come together to have a overall good thing. And then just moving forward with a lot of these things to take into effect the fact that a lot of the drugs that are put out have such harsh side effects that you can't function. And so there needs to be more of a discourse and more research done on medications and drugs that do not affect people in that way, and allow them to work and allow them to do things like I did last week, which is to run the Peachtree Road Race, which is 6.2 miles, and then go a few days later to go surprise my sister on her 30th birthday. Those are things for me that were not a reality even 3 days ago, or 3 years ago, sorry. So,
thank you, Lindsay. Thank you. Next we have Lou.
Yeah, thanks again. And thanks, Lindsay. Thanks, everyone. Oh, sorry. Yep. Thanks, everyone here for all the stories. And, it makes you, I always say to myself, people, I have chronic pain 15 years. So it's like almost, over almost a quarter of my life. And it's definitely a challenge. I'm always in some pain, and I'm going to talk about how the medication helps me, manage the pain. And I'm fortunate, like Lindsay, to have a full-time job. But it is, it's a real hearing the stories. I always say that there's always folks that you have to admire for what they deal with. And so many of them are here today, and I'm sure online as well. And so I appreciate everything you all do and are going through. So peripheral neuropathy is a kind of an odd, it's a neurological condition. There are 100+ causes of it. Mine is autoimmune, which is like 7 out of 100,000. And usually when it's autoimmune, the symptoms are worse. The pain is worse, the walking disability, the balance, all those things. So I have all those. So in my case, it's a protein in the blood. There are hundreds of those. And this one is being overproduced and destroying the myelin that surrounds the nerves in the peripheral nervous system. So my feet especially, and hands a little bit, only a little, fortunately. So when it started, I was a bit of a jogger. I was never a great athlete, but I would go out and run a couple of miles. And so one day I started running. We were on vacation in Nantucket, and all of a sudden I fell. And all of a sudden I realized I wouldn't be able to jog anymore without falling. So fortunately, I got a diagnosis very quickly. Having the right neurologist or whoever the medical specialty is makes all the difference in the world. And so I was diagnosed at an early point with this anti-MAG neuropathy. And initially, the pain was modest, and it was mainly later in the day. But within about 6 months, it was constant. Still better in the first half of the day. The morning is definitely more manageable. And then as the day goes on, it's, much more painful. My drug treatment has always focused on an anticonvulsant initially it was called Neurontin. And then when it went off patent, or generic, it's become known as gabapentin is the name. And it's actually one of the top 10 most prescribed medications. It's very common for folks with peripheral neuropathy. And I've always had, fortunately, good medical coverage, like Lindsay, at my job. And so I noticed sometimes they would put the dollar value of the prescription. And I know that the Neurontin was like 7 times more expensive than the gabapentin. So initially, I've had to increase the dosage over these years. So initially, I was taking like 600 milligrams a day. And now, to get through, I'm taking 1,500 milligrams a day. And I try very hard to manage with that and not increase it, although I know some PN patients take as much as 300 milligrams a day. and I've had very few side effects from my drug, which is always obviously an issue, but so many people say it makes them dizzy, it makes them sleepy. I did put on a few pounds. I blame that on the neuron, but it may or may not be that. But, and it's had no effect on my appetite or, fortunately, my ability to sleep, which is another big issue for a lot of folks with neuropathy. I do know, in terms of the management, that if I miss a dose, like I get busy at work and I keep the pills, they're always right there. But even then, you sometimes forget to take your dose every 4 hours. And within an hour or two, I will all of a sudden feel much more pain than I did before. And obviously, kind of hit yourself in the head, how could I forget that? But, and I've tried other treatments. I tried acupuncture. That didn't really do anything. Other folks have different experience, I guess. I exercise regularly because it helps maintain, the muscles that you still need to use to get around. And I get regular massage, which feels great, and it helps, manage, I think, relaxes your muscles and you feel less tense generally. So how has it affected my life? Well, day to day, I go to the work in the morning most days. It's great. As the day goes on, really by 3, 4 o'clock, I really start to feel fatigued. And even if I've remembered my medicine, it's still more painful. And by the time the evening rolls around, it's, considerably more painful. And so, what I do is I plan everything I do around, am I going to be able to stand or walk to where the activity is? Is there parking? So many things, I need to think about that most folks that don't have a condition like this don't need to think about. And that's, it's just the way it is. And still the pain is always there to some degree. And, in my nearly 15 years with neuropathy, there really haven't come any new treatments. There are some new medications, Lyrica, things like that are being touted for neuropathy. But my neurologist, who's one of the gurus up at Johns Hopkins, which is another advantage of living near a place like that, says, if the gabapentin is working, it's milder, just stick with that and don't rock the boat, is his advice. So I welcome the FDA's efforts to evaluate and approve better treatment options for PN patients. If you want to learn more about PN, tomorrow's post, I'm in a support group in DC, and 2 of our members, Lynn and Robert Mobley, are having an article published in tomorrow's health section, which is the first. We've been pushing on this for years. I'm also in the support group, and so finally they are getting it published. So I think you might be interested in reading their story. And in my other hat, I'm the president of the Foundation for Peripheral Neuropathy, which is a small nonprofit dedicated to peripheral neuropathy. We have a small staff in Chicago, and the great website and for information about neuropathy, how to help yourself, medication, support groups, doctors, and the like. So if you know anyone that has peripheral neuropathy, I recommend that to you. And thanks all for listening and being here today.
Thank you, Lou.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next, we have Rose.
Hello, I'm Rose Bigham, and I'm here from the Seattle area, where I worked at Microsoft for a little over 23 years before becoming disabled due to chronic pain. Full disclosure, I'm a member of the Alliance for the Treatment of Intractable Pain, which is a advocacy group that has no money of any kind except no donations. We are self-funded and therefore broke always. And I am brought to you today by the wonders of prednisone. So that's how I managed to get here from Seattle. Prior to my disability, I had something like 7 major surgeries over many years. And each time I was prescribed opioid medications for post-op pain relief, and they worked. I recovered. I stopped taking the pain meds when my pain decreased, just like 99% of people routinely do. In 2006, I suddenly experienced crippling low back pain, which failed to respond to treatment of any kind, and eventually led to diagnoses of ankylosing spondylitis, fibromyalgia, and Crohn's disease. Up until then, I had been pretty athletic. I was a college scholarship athlete. I, like 10 this morning, did triathlons, did kickboxing, lifted weights, whitewater rafting, hiking, camping. In Seattle, we do everything outdoors. And little by little, I had to give all that up because it was the only thing I could do to haul myself to work every day. And I actually didn't even realize that until my pain doctor asked me if my life had become limited to the four walls in which I lived. And I broke down crying because I had not realized how much I'd given up or had been stolen from me because of pain. I began long-term opioid therapy back around 2006, 2007, which allowed me to keep working at my very high-pressure career that I loved for another 7 years. And I remain on opioids to this day. In 2013, the severity of my symptoms led me to be declared fully disabled by Social Security Administration, and I agreed. In addition to constant severe pain, I routinely experience flares of worse pain and inflammation in all of my major joints, depending on the day, as well as extreme fatigue, like when your body is constantly battling inflammation. It's exhausting. And that leads to some cognitive deficits, memory, attention, focus, losing words. And it's severely lifestyle limiting. I take prescription NSAIDs, muscle relaxants, incredibly expensive biologic injectables to suppress my immune system, and long-term opioids. I've tried and failed SSRIs, SNRIs, other NSAIDs, other biologics. And to be clear, I am not depressed. I'm in pain. Thank you. I've stopped dozens of medications due to insurmountable side effects like racing heart rate, sudden horrific sweats and flushing, blood pressure spikes, skin rashes, open wounds, meds that just knocked me unconscious, including while driving to work, in which I caused a car accident when I was still trying to work. And I stopped a bunch of them because they just didn't work. I've tried the following interventional modalities: cortisone injections in my hip, feet, back, and neck. Don't recommend that ever. Radiofrequency ablation of my facet joint nerve endings in my spine. Luckily, my test was an epic fail, so they never actually did it, for which I am grateful. Physical therapy, acupuncture, massage therapy. I still see an osteopath, aquatic physical therapy, yoga. I use a TENS unit and ice at home, and I have innumerable adaptive devices. I could afford all of those things because I was still working and, like you, had excellent health insurance. And because I live in a metropolitan area, those services were available to me. But people in rural areas and with lower incomes don't have those luxuries. And now that I'm disabled, most of those are beyond my reach too. On my best days, and with meds, my pain levels hover at around a 7, usually on a scale of 1 to 10. On bad days, I can barely move. My condition is progressive. There's no cure. It's only going to get worse. My biggest nightmare used to be that I'd be in a car accident or suffer some sort of injury, and a paramedic would strap me on a backboard and shatter my spine. That was my worst nightmare. Now I wear a medic ID bracelet with all kinds of information on it. My new worst nightmare is being admitted to the hospital, being in agony, and being denied pain relief, which is happening all over this country today. Despite all that modern medicine has to offer, my pain is not well managed. I should probably be on a higher dose of pain medication than I am now, but I can't be because I live in Washington State, which led the country with the first opioid prescribing legislation back in 2009. The atmosphere in Washington State is such that most doctors won't prescribe pain medication to anyone. If you can find a pain specialist, you might be okay, but no primary care and no specialist will prescribe. It's so bad that Human Rights Watch in New York has led an investigation into the inhumane treatment of chronic pain patients in this country with a special focus on Washington State because it's that bad. It's medical torture. I'm here representing the 250,000 people in my state and the roughly 10.5 million people in America who suffer from incurable chronic pain severe enough to need medication. The 2016 CDC mandates, which is what they quickly became for our veterans and most of the states, have done irreparable harm to the millions of people in incurable pain. I am here to ask the FDA, what can you do to fix this? Less than 1% of people ever develop an opioid addiction from prescriptions, and the first opiate people misuse today is heroin, not prescriptions. Yet the 99% of us who have never misused a medication ever are forced to suffer and are treated like criminals by our providers and the healthcare system. We are now, I think all of us, forced to choose between getting your pain managed, if you're lucky, and anything else which might bother you, like anxiety or depression, because God help you, you can't take opioids ever, and you certainly can't take them with a benzo, even though they have been prescribed conjointly for decades. When you want to talk about barriers to care, the biggest barrier to pain care is a lack of providers who are brave enough to prescribe. There are some other factors like CMS telling insurance companies it's okay to routinely deny pain prescriptions unless you get prior authorization, even though you've been getting those pain medications for decades. I was denied myself in January by my Medicare insurer, even though I have been on pain meds forever with no change in dose. FDA, we are begging you, correct the CDC's egregious mistakes and tell the country the truth about prescription opioids. They are safe and effective for 99% of us, even for long-term use. Thank you.
Thank you, Rose. Next, we have Hillary.
I kind of feel like you said everything. I'm just going to go through what I've got here. Hi, I'm Hillary. I'm a support group leader, events coordinator, and member of the board of the Richmond Fibromyalgia and Chronic Pain Association. I also am on the ATIP mailing list, so I've been keeping up with things that way. My pain scale, a 1 on my pain scale is like my best day ever. A 1 would be like if you haven't ever worked out and you go to the gym and you lift way too much weight everywhere with every part of your body possible. The next day, when you realize how bad you've kicked your rear, that's my best day ever. I've been in chronic pain so much, I really don't know what it feels like to not be in pain. Unfortunately, it seems I'm not alone. An 8 on my scale would be when the nerve pain is so bad, it feels like all of my skin has been removed. And my joints have been packed with a combination of glass shards and gravel. I have lupus, fibromyalgia, narcolepsy, bursitis, arthritis, and I could go on, but you'll be bored. So I guess on my scale, a 9, which I've never experienced, would be childbirth, and then a 10 would probably be like if your arm got ripped off and you pass out. So, yeah. haven't been there. So I take opioid medication every day so that I can get comfortable enough so that I can actually go to sleep. And I have narcolepsy. So, yeah, that's fun. I get dry needling done as part of my physical therapy, and that helps for a day or two. I do get cortisone shots into my trigger points in my back, as well as into my joints. I've had my shoulders, elbows, knees, and hips done, as well as into the muscles in my back. I practice yoga and I stretch several times daily. I go to the gym a couple of times a week, and that hurts. It hurts to exercise, but I know I need to do it. So, I think I have Lyrica to thank for gaining 100 pounds. But, yeah, it was actually, I doubled my weight. I went from 104 to 208, so within a year. I use ice packs and heating pads, including a mattress pad that's like, it's a heated mattress pad, and it's dual zone, so I don't have to roast my husband. So that's, I recommend that for anyone married. I do a lot of things that are not necessarily taking pills. I do take a lot of pills. I take a lot of medication. I have a spreadsheet. But I do things that aren't necessarily drugs to try to help the pain. I'm looking at what I wrote, and it's really just, people have said this stuff already.
Okay, tell your version.
My version? Well, before medications, I would cry myself to sleep every night. And I would really hope that I didn't wake up. Because I couldn't deal with another day in pain. Then I would cry when I woke up because I knew I had another day to deal with. So, I think that chronic pain is a job in and of itself. I don't know how anyone can possibly work when they feel like this. Oh, I can't see. On a good day, I can volunteer at an animal shelter for a few hours. On a bad day, I can't get out of bed. I might be able to meet a friend for coffee if it's a good day. The current regulations in Virginia, at least, I have to go to my doctor's office to get the piece of paper for my opioid prescription, and then take that to the pharmacist, and then they fill the pain prescription. However, what happens when I'm in a flare and I can't drive because I'm in so much pain? How am I supposed to do that? There aren't taxis where I live. I'm kind of like the outskirts, My husband has to work, so he can't take me back and forth. And if I'm in bed and can't get out of bed and run out of pain medications, there's just a serious gap there. Yeah, every month. Yeah.
You have to go.
Yes. Yep. About 15 years ago, I made the mistake of, I actually had just gotten my pain meds and for the month. And they were on the counter and I knocked them over into the toilet. And the cap was off. So I did get the bottle out. And I couldn't deal with actually removing the pills from the toilet. It was just not going to happen. So I called my doctor's office, half crying and half laughing at myself, and explained to them what I had done. And they said, oh, it's no big deal. We'll call the pharmacist and we'll figure out what we can do. And my insurance wouldn't cover it, but it was a generic. So I just paid full price for it. Okay, well, that's pretty cool, right? What would happen if that happened today? Someone said it. I heard it. Yeah. Yeah, you wouldn't get it. You would just have to suffer through. Suffer. Yeah, that's what all of us do in one way, shape, or form.
Thank you, Hillary. Thank you so
much. If I can clarify for Hillary, because that would mark you as drug seeking, because you lost your prescription, like addicts tend to say, you would be refused, you'd be red flagged as an addict, and they would not give you something to taper down. You would face immediate withdrawal, which would possibly send you into seizures and threaten your life.
Yeah.
And that's what would happen in any state in the country. Full stop.
Thank you. Please, round of applause for all of our topic 2 panelists, please. Another round of applause. Okay. So we have a few polling questions, 3 polling questions for this topic, and I want to give you an overview of what those topic questions will be, just so you know what to expect. The first one where we'll ask you to identify the range of medications or devices or interventional procedures you may have experienced while managing your chronic pain. The second one will ask for you to identify alternative or complementary therapies you may have tried or that you are using. And the third question, and yes, you may select all that apply for all of these questions. And the third one will be asking for the downsides for your medication. So that's kind of the agenda for the afternoon. Before we go into that, though, one of our FDA panelists did have a follow-up question on something that we talked about in the morning. So if I could just ask you to please be patient before we jump into topic 2. I'll turn to Electra if you'd like to follow up.
Yes, we heard several people mention fatigue, and I just wanted to probe a little bit on that and see by a show of hands how many people have fatigue and just how impactful is it?
Okay. For those of you on the web, most of the hands went up, if not all, and maybe we'll take a comment or 2 from folks to speak about the fatigue. Sarah, if you wouldn't mind.
I live in chronic pain. I have fatigue all the time. Fighting chronic pain is tiresome. It wipes you out. Meds can help, but you're still tired from the meds. It's chronic.
Maybe 1 or 2 more comments.
I wanted to say, as far as fatigue goes, I can speak from my experience. I've got rheumatoid. I've got a whole handful. I'm not going to go into it, but what I can say is the fatigue at times is as burdensome or even more than the pain. When you put those 2 things together, it can be unconscionable. But on the flip side of that, what I will also say is for someone, myself, who is on opioid medication, I can tell you that when I was properly medicated, utilizing opioids as well as other medications, I found that, in fact, some of those side effects you would expect, like fatigue, fog, and stuff like that, I did not experience. In fact, I was actually more engaged. I was able to actually function more. And I think most importantly, I was able to do activities of daily living that I think anybody would want to have in their life to be able to accomplish. So fatigue, I think it's like a double-sided, sword. I mean, some days, I don't know which is worse, the fatigue or the pain. Sometimes it's both, sometimes it's one or the other. Okay.
Any follow-up questions, Electra? Or? Okay. Could we have our first poll? And that's fatigue would be a really important aspect as you think about drafting your docket comments and writing those. If you could consider thinking about fatigue and characterizing that for us and the impact that has on your daily life, that would be very helpful for us. Okay. There's a lot of text and there's only one screen that's working, so I will read it. Please be patient with me. It's a bit small for me as well.
First, how many of these can we answer?
You can check all that apply for this option. Mm-hmm. Yes. Unfortunately, you will have to click all of them. There's no check all that apply option up there. So have you ever used any of the following therapies to manage your chronic pain? So whether you're currently using them or in the past, please select all that apply. A, transdermal or topical patches. B, acetaminophen, prescription NSAIDs, or over-the-counter products such as ibuprofen. C, opioid medication. D, antidepressants. E, non-invasive medical devices such as TENS. F, anticonvulsant medications. G, implantable medical devices and or surgical procedures. H, other therapies, so drugs or medical devices that are not mentioned here. Or I, I'm not using any therapies such as drugs or medical devices. And I'll give folks a couple of minutes to respond. And we're collecting the same information from those of the participants from the webcast as well.
While we're collecting that, can I just make a request of the afternoon and morning panelists? If you would provide us with a copy of your statements, I would find that helpful.
Great. If you could submit that to the public docket, that would be helpful. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us and we'll help make sure that we have your statements. Okay, can we go ahead and get these results displayed, Graham? Okay. A range of everything except for the fact, except for I'm not using any therapies such as drugs or medical devices. 93% indicated B, but really it's a range of all of them. Can I ask our webcast folks, our webcast moderators, for what the
webcast you had about 90% with the like acetaminophen and opioid medications, and all the rest were about 75%, except for implantable devices, which is about 30.
Okay. Thank you, Graham. Thank you. So what I'd like to do now is probe a little bit about what aspects of your chronic pain some of these classes address well, and then what aspects of your chronic pain they may not address well. Does that sound good? Why don't we start with, in the interest of time, I'm going to lump A and B together, if that's okay, as buckets. And so for folks that indicated, which is many of you, transdermal or topical patches, or the acetaminophen prescription NSAIDs, or the over-the-counter products, what aspects of your chronic pain are they managing well, and what aspects are not being managed well with those? We can start with Joe right here.
Yes. If I take the NSAIDs, I have ulcerative colitis, and I start bleeding really bad. In fact, recently I took some ibuprofen, and man, it was bad. I was in bad shape. So not everybody can take them, like Jeff Sessions,
Okay, Sarah, I think we have a comment from here in the audience.
Hello? Hello? Okay, thank you. So I am a patient with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, as some other patients have been
Could you
today.
please, sorry, hold your mic up closer, I think.
Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. I'm a patient with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, like so many other patients here today. All day today, I've actually been in pain, shockingly. Normally, it varies from day to day. I actually wrote an article called The Ups and Downs of Living with Unpredictable Pain, because it's unpredictable. I try not to take medication to the extent possible, because I've had side effects from other medications, which is actually what led me to the diagnosis of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, ironically. The one medication I finally decided to cave into last year was naproxen. I was shocked to discover from the pharmacist at CVS that this is not something that I can take constantly, that I should not actually have to have it reordered monthly. And yet, that's what happened. I actually got the phone call saying, do you want to, get more naproxen? Naproxen is useless. I rarely take medication. On the days I'm in so much pain, I will actually take it, but it does no good. A tennis ball resting on my shoulder while at work, that actually is more effective sometimes than naproxen itself. Right now, I have no health insurance because I'm a contract attorney. I work as a contractor, so I have the flexibility. So I can go to physical therapy. So I can see all the different specialists. And so that I can change my work schedule as needed throughout the day. As a contractor, I don't have health insurance. So right now, I'm managing my pain by taking my expired naproxen. It expired in April. And yet, that is the only thing I can take, because if I were to go and get more naproxen or any other medication, it would cost me hundreds of dollars. It's better for me to just take naproxen that's expired than for me to try to get another prescription. That's my barrier right there.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you. Okay, we'll take a couple comments from over here.
So I too have Ehlers-Danlos. So with that, unpredictable dislocations happen sometimes daily. For me, I am on a handful of medications, anti-inflammatories. I'm on gabapentin. They've tried everything. Before my diagnosis, I had 15 knee dislocations. In 14 years, I had 15 knee dislocations. The only thing that they could say to do was physical therapy, ride a bike, and I found Lanacane patches. Those patches, they didn't so much help as they made me sort of distracted by the pain. The warming sensation of menthol patches, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a severed artery. Sure, it helps better than nothing, but it may as well be nothing. The naproxen, I take ridiculous amounts of naproxen every day, twice a day. And I worry that the side effects are not worth what it is giving me. It's giving me a slightly better range of motion. It's giving me the ability to grip things that weigh more than 5 pounds. But it doesn't fix everything. It doesn't even come close to dealing with the inflammation. And the inflammation is just the tip of the iceberg. It's when people like us have the problems we have, we can't just live our lives. I'm now facing a 3-month recovery because I tried to mow my lawn to avoid getting a fine from my city. Halfway through, I can't use my hand anymore.
Thank you.
There's just not enough.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. We'll take one comment from perhaps this side of the room. Sarah?
This is about side effects of medications that I've tried.
Or just kind of
I get nervous. I have the worst social anxiety, so I'm like,
well, thank
what?
you so much for coming here to share your comments.
When you ask about the medications that's been listed, I've been suffering chronic pain 18 years, and I'm only 46. I've had the worst side effects from drugs, FDA approved. Thank you. But there's not one thing on there except for medical devices and the stem things that they implant in your spine. From Lyrica causing me to obsess over suicide. I am a 3-time suicide survivor because of these drugs that you guys approved. Thanks. There are better medications, and I've actually given up on FDA approved medications, and I only take herbs in their raw form because every one of those drugs up there that you guys approved for me to take led me to almost die I'm also narcoleptic. Hey. But almost every one of those drugs I've been on either caused my heart to rush where I almost passed out, suicidal ideations, or my blood sugar level would drop. I mean, every kind of side effect. Some people just don't do well on drugs. And let them have alternatives. You know, stop controlling everything any person wants to use to treat their form of whatever disease they're dealing with. Let people have the American choice what we put in our body. As long as we're proving that it's not killing people. I haven't died from green tea. I like ginger. That really helps.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your perspectives. We do want to hear about everyone's experiences with the range of products they're using to manage their condition. And so I would like to take maybe one more before I ask another follow-up question. Perhaps if we can pass the mic all the way down to you. Yeah.
I'll get there.
Okay.
Hi, I want to comment about the NSAIDs. I've been in chronic pain for 44 years, and I'm 48. I was diagnosed with juvenile arthritis at 4. And back then, you know, it was aspirin. They took high-dose aspirin, and then naproxen came along. And as I got older, I'd also developed ankylosing spondylitis and the degenerative stuff in my back. And I did find that the NSAIDs worked for me. However, being on them 46 years, and my GI doctor says I have chronic gastritis and I can't take them anymore. So and Tylenol doesn't work for this kind of severe pain. It wasn't designed for severe pain, and it also causes liver failure. And then I was surprised to find out that NSAIDs, except for aspirin, have an FDA boxed warning for causing stroke and heart attack, but yet they're pushed. And why aren't we showing the numbers of people dying from NSAIDs? You know, not just that, but I also worked as an RN, and there's a lot of people having to get on dialysis because of ibuprofen, and but yet I'm on opioid medicine, and I've been on that for about 14 years, and I have never been with one doctor, and because of the opioid medicine, I'm able to do the other therapies I need to do to be active, and you know, the yoga, the walking, the stretching. But I don't think many doctors are telling their patients, oh, by the way, you could have a stroke or a heart attack even within the first week of taking your NSAID. And then, of course, the the Vioxx and all those were pulled off the market. So even the COX-2 inhibitors, we have one left. So I think that's another reason we need to carefully screen and allow doctors to prescribe what patients need. I also have a spinal cord stimulator. I do massages, acupuncture, which does nothing, doesn't help, just costs money. I've been on anticonvulsants, you name it, antidepressants, all that. So.
Thank you. The follow-up question after this will be really going into what else you may use to manage your chronic pain, such as the acupuncture, which you indicated that it didn't work for you, but we'll see what other folks say. But before we get into that, you kind of spoke to your journey of how you tried various things and then you're taking the opioid medication. Can a few others speak to their medical journey, perhaps, and what led to you taking opioids, and perhaps what adding this to your management approach has provided you with in regards to improvements in your chronic pain, aspects of your chronic pain?
Hi, I have rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis. I've lost all my cartilage, so I have bone on bone on all my joints. And I also have lymphoma. So I can't take the drugs that they approve for rheumatoid arthritis because one of the side effects is getting lymphoma. So I don't want to activate that in a worse place than it is now. So the first drugs they started giving me for my pain management was NSAIDs, and they gave me naproxen, and within 3 days it burnt a hole in my stomach, and I started bleeding from it. So I can't take NSAIDs. So I went on opioids, and I've been on opioids for years without an increase. It gives me some quality of life. Could I use more? Yes. I won't take more. But, I'm dependent on it. I don't want to say I'm addicted, like everybody is out there wanting to say. Just like a person on insulin is dependent on it for their diabetes, like high blood pressure is dependent on high blood pressure medicine. We're dependent on it, not addicted to it. Yes, it would be hard to get off it, but if you're in chronic pain, you're not getting off it. And I don't want to take gabapentin because it was originally made for epileptic seizures. I don't have epilepsy. Why do I want to take gabapentin and do something to my brain that may not be there? But anyway, so about using other drugs, yes, there's a lot of side effects with the other ones. And the only side effect with opioids that I see is an addiction if you had to get off it. But if you have chronic pain, you're not coming off it, and it works.
Okay. And thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Can we have a few more comments? Okay, right here. Yeah, go ahead.
My name's Gary Snook, and I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself. I want to talk about something different because I have been blessed with having the best treatment and the best
Gary,
doctor.
Could you just put the mic a little bit closer? Yeah, thank you.
Anyway, I have been blessed with having the best pain treatment for years. And I've been sick for 18 years, and I have a genetic variant, and so it took really high doses to kill my pain. And so when I ended up at Dr. Forrest Tennant's, and I know many of you know him, I was north of 3,000 DME. And I've been part of his pain research for several years. And some of the non-opioid breakthroughs that he has made that has allowed me to reduce my opioids from over 3,000 to 360 milligrams. The first big one was HCG, and taking that hormone allowed me to cut my opioids in half. And then he introduced oxytocin, which I was directed to take before I took a pain killer. Now, sometimes that oxytocin worked almost as good for me as a 30 milligram oxycodone. Sometimes it didn't, but Dr. Tennant continued to add attack adhesive arachnoiditis from several different directions. And the next direction he looked at was the inflammation and what anti-inflammatories will pass the blood-brain barrier. And so for me, the anti-inflammatory that really worked for me was a methylpregnenolone troche, and which allowed me to cut my dose even further. And just a few weeks ago, he discovered how to interrupt. Well, there's three kinds of pain, right? There's descending brain pain, there's your baseline pain and flare pain. But anyway, he figured out how to interrupt that descending brain pain that every AA patient has in the morning when they wake up. I used to get up in the morning, sit on the edge of bed, and pray to die and cry for hours before I met Dr. Tennant. And the doctors, incidentally, used my pain to pressure me into epidural steroid injections. If you want to help AA patients, we have an incurable disease, black box injections, spinal injections for us, because they won't help us. We have an incurable disease, and we are the goose that laid the golden egg for interventional pain doctors. Anyway, I think this new discovery that's non-opioid of Dr. Tennant's that he just figured out in the last few weeks to interrupt the descending pain in the morning. I don't have a pain flare anymore, and I haven't counted my meds, but I am guessing that I am going to be able to further reduce, at least by 50%, my opioids. And you know what really what breaks my heart? I don't want to be sick and on opioids. I've been disabled for 18 years, and my small family business, I made $1.3 million the year of my disability. I'm a super achiever, and I want to recover, and I work hard at it. And it was my hope that Dr. Tennant would come up with a cure for this horrible malady. And he told me once, he says he thinks adhesive arachnoiditis is the largest public health crisis in the United States has ever faced, that there's 3 million people who have AA. I disagree with him. I think there's 30 million. But his non-opioid treatments will work for just about any painful condition. And
thank you, Gary, for sharing your perspectives. And I know you traveled far, so thank you so much for coming here. And I see that you have your comments written down, so I really encourage you to type them up and submit them to the public docket as well, so that they become part of the public record. I do want to take a quick moment to go to the webcast and see what we're hearing from our webcast participants.
Hi. Lots of the same things that have been said in here. Several people have mentioned the problems with NSAIDs and being able to tolerate them. They agree that there's no one-size-fits-all. Things like ketamine or gabapentin may work for some people, but don't work for others. A few comments, many comments about opioid use for long-term being effective for them. And one question for Hillary. What's the brand of the mattress pad you use?
What was it, honey? Sunbeam? Sunbeam. I got it from Amazon. I know that.
Apparently the company is Sunbeam.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to take one more comment, and then I'll see if my FDA panelists have any follow-up questions before we move on to our next discussion point.
Hello, everyone. My name is Coco. I'm here to represent my father. It all goes back to, I'm going to kind of echo back what we mentioned this morning and then talk about what therapy he has been using, which helped him a lot. About 25 years ago, my dad was an international student coming here, and he didn't really know how to drive in the snow. So unfortunately, someone hit him, and he had a really severe car accident. And he didn't have a lot of money because he came here for a full scholarship, so he didn't have extra money to go to get therapy after the injury. And I still remember, like, he still worked really hard because he has a family of 6 people depending on him. He worked 14 to 12 hours every single day, and I could somehow remember when he was in the room and kind of crying a little bit because it was just, he didn't have the money to buy drugs. And so a good day, I remember until years later, a good day for him is when a doctor, acupuncturist, really listens to him, what his day-to-day look like, and also telling him it's not going to be like a drugs where you could take it and you're going to recover super fast and cover your pain, but it's going to take a while as long as you keep constantly and seeing him every day to day. And so I remember when my dad eventually had a chance to take us out, and he felt happy because I could see him that the pain was relieved with all the therapies that he took. And I'm thankful. And for FDA, I was just saying what you could do is, why do you want to join to the healthcare field? Your people out there could actually make a difference for people or patients. A small thing could change your life. So I would just want to say thank you everyone here listening, and hope people who could have the power to take an action and help those who are in need. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay. If we could see our next polling question, Graham, and I'll just follow up with the FDA folks here. Any follow-up questions that you may have? No? Okay. So this question is asking, what else are you doing besides the list that we had already spoke to earlier? So besides the therapies mentioned, what else are you doing to manage your chronic pain? And here, once again, you can check all that apply. A, dietary and herbal supplements. B, diet modifications and behavioral changes. C, cannabinoids. D, complementary or alternative therapies. E, physical or occupational therapy. F, mobile applications. G, counseling or psychological treatment. H, other therapies not mentioned. I am not doing or taking any therapies to treat my chronic pain.
We have a question here.
Yes.
So is it, what are you currently doing, or if they have used it in the past, can they also?
It's what else that you have done or are currently doing. Similar vein as the last question. Thank you.
I have a question. If you could.
Sorry, I'm not sure where the question. Oh, yes, Hillary.
What are mobile applications?
Sure. I will speak to it briefly, and then I may turn to our colleague from the Center for Devices to expand. But I believe there's some relaxation apps, perhaps, or things that may help you cope, perhaps. I don't know if, Michelle, you wanted to expand to speak about some of these mobile applications.
So we're just speaking about any kind of things that you may be using on your cell phone or on a computer to help you manage your chronic pain.
If you are under a pain contract, you're not allowed to use the medical marijuana in most places. They'll kick you off your thing, you know, and then you'll lose your medicine. Right. And they're finding out now that it helps a lot.
Okay, thank you for the clarification, Joe. Okay, I'm just going to take a moment to see what the results look like, and then we'll ask for folks to comment and add to the dialogue. Okay, we had a range of experiences for folks in the room. Okay, and could I have, Graham, would you mind telling me what the results on the web look like?
Fairly similar on the web. A lot of complementary and alternative therapies, around 80%. Same with dietary and herbal supplements, and 70% physical therapy and diet modifications. Everything else 50 or less.
Okay, thank you. If I could ask for folks who indicated that they use the mobile applications, or any of these really, what are these other therapies providing you, that the prescription therapies or the interventions that we spoke to earlier and on the previous slide, that those are not providing you with? So where is that unmet medical need, perhaps, is one way for me to phrase that. Okay, I see that we have lots of hands, so we'll start here.
As I mentioned earlier, I have sickle cell disease, and so anytime our hemoglobin numbers drop,
that increases the pain. And so most of us have had blood transfusions or exchanges where they take out our sickle cell blood and they give us normal people's blood through a needle that goes into our groin to increase the hemoglobin level, well, to try to increase the hemoglobin levels so that we have less crises. So that's one thing that I didn't see on the screen.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. We have someone here. Okay, I'll just go here and then here if that's okay. Thank you.
Hi. I feel like these kinds of treatments, I had to build trust with my doctor first. I felt like I almost had to prove that the medicines weren't working first. And then it was, I've heard about physical therapy. Can we try that? And I did that for probably 6 months, or at least until the insurance was like, no. And that was really helpful. I have CRPS in my right foot, and it regained, I'd been limping on it for 3 years or so, and it regained the muscles. You know, through physical therapy, it was the physical therapist who said, have you tried a TENS unit? I was like, what? No, I thought. Anyway, I guess, sorry, I'm a little nervous, but the overall point is I felt like to get these therapies, it was almost this secret level where I had to keep going back to my doctor. And it was a combination of all of these, plus some of the prescriptions that have been really helpful for me and my pain.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. I know you said you were nervous, but you shared your experiences beautifully. Thank you. We'll go here.
Hi. So based on the questions that you're asking, I'm getting the feeling that what AFDA might have been expecting to hear was that the biggest problem is people are having trouble accessing alternatives to opioid pain medication. And I think for some people that's true. That has not been my experience. My difficulty has been that I've been through all of the alternate therapies. And at 22, I had a choice. And I was presented with a choice. I could go on high-dose, long-term opioid therapy for the rest of my life. I have IC-BPS refractory. So what that means essentially is that my bladder is lined with open wounds that don't heal. And so I had long-term high-dose opioid therapy for the rest of my life, barring some sort of research miracle, or I could sit at home on a toilet and pee every few minutes for the rest of my life. And I'm pretty sure that my husband and my kid and all the students I've taught over the years would say I made the right choice.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. Once again, I'm going to ask for your permission to go a little bit into the break, if that's okay, because I do want to hear more perspectives on what we're talking about right now. So we might 5 minutes over into the break, if that's okay with you all, and take a few more comments. Maybe on this side? Okay.
Wait, hello? This is Sharon.
Yes.
I just want to clarify so that it doesn't influence comments one way or the other. We don't have expectations for what you're going to tell us. If we expected that if we thought we knew, we wouldn't be asking. So please believe there's no motive per se other than to truly get your full and undirected feedback.
Thank you, Sharon. We'll take a comment from here, and if that's okay, okay, and then I'll come to you, Tim. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I initially, because I was diagnosed, well, I began having pain at 17 that was very, very significant. And the only reason I'm going into this is because it plays into how my treatment has changed over time. So I was very athletic. I played basketball as a cheerleader in middle school. By the time high school came around, it started to get to where I was beginning to have pain. I actually had a doctor because it was actually my husband's family, worked at the doctor's office I was seeing, and it wasn't ever supposed to get back to me, but they had actually told my husband's aunt that I was a hypochondriac and there was nothing wrong with me. And I was 19 years old whenever the doctor in the same practice, she came back from my seminar, and she came and she checked me for all the different places and all the different points. She had been to a conference over fibromyalgia. And at 19 years old, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, and it has continued to progressively be, more and more trouble as the years have gone by. I have a particular problem with nearly all medical interventions as far as medicine-wise. I'm allergic to all but 2 antibiotics known to man as far as infectious disease doctors and all, including like vancomycin. They told me I'm really going to be in trouble, but I'm allergic to these medication options, opioids, morphine. I don't have whatever that enzyme or receptor you have to have for that to be effective, but the rest of them I'm allergic to. So I lived on ibuprofen from 19 until 4 years ago, and I'll be 40 next month. So for years I've been taking 800 milligrams of ibuprofen 3 to 4 times a day, and my liver enzymes had begun to be elevated about 3.5 years ago. 4 years ago, I did find out about something that's a super hot topic, and it was kratom. And from kratom, then I began to get relief, and then I began to research additional herbal methods. And so I've incorporated like cat's claw because it's an anti-inflammatory. So instead of taking the ibuprofen, I can use it. Skull cap for like the nerve pain, as I have problems with my thoracic and my lumbar spine, and it'll get to my sciatic nerve. I tried physical therapy for a bulging disc at L5S1, and I ended up being told, we can't help you, so here's a TENS unit, and that's all we can do. I can't afford to continue going to massage therapy and the chiropractor 3 times a week, but they are helpful. But the most helpful thing I have found has been the dietary and herbal supplements, and they're so controversial, but yet it's the first time in my life I've had a quality of life. My son is 21, and my youngest son is 17, and I did not get to spend time with them in the way that I should have been able to when they were younger because all I had was ibuprofen. I wouldn't have even attempted what I did this past weekend. Now, I may have had some not so great outcomes because of it, but I went hiking in the mountains with my 17-year-old down to a creek in Tennessee. Coming back up, I had some significant falls. These things aren't cures either, and whenever you're hiking, I didn't have it with me. So honestly, the pain had begun to get increased because I normally would use it like I would ibuprofen. So it's 3 times a day. And it helps, and it's made a difference in my life. And my children could have had this mom while they were young, but instead they had to wait until now when they're almost grown. And this is my son's last summer to be at home with me. And we'll do something else, whether I have to go down tumbling again or not. I got a broken toe, possibly in my foot, and 2 horribly beat up knees, but I wouldn't have even tried it had I not found out about kratom 4 years ago.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. We do want to hear about all of your experiences with everything that you think may be helping you manage your chronic pain. We won't be able to go too in-depth into all of the topics. We're already over into our break right now. So I do want to do a quick look again at my webcast moderators to see what we're hearing on the web.
Hi. Someone spoke of their pain relief toolbox, which I think is what we're hearing in the room as well. Different types of supplements that people take, vitamins and minerals, dietary changes, using yoga, ice, heating pads, acupuncture, massage, chiropractic care. Some people have mentioned that things like physical therapy are very helpful, but sometimes they require a baseline level of pain control, which just might not be possible for everybody.
Thank you, Leela.
Can I just jump in really quickly? Sure. 1 second. The thing about all of these therapies is that some of them work for some percentage of the people, and that's awesome. Whatever works for anybody should be available to them. But the kicker is, aside from maybe physical therapy and counseling, none of them are covered by insurance. So it shifts the burden It shifts the burden of care from a safe, effective prescribed medication covered by insurance to out-of-pocket costs for people like us who are managing severe levels of pain, most of us 24 hours a day. When I've heard people say, hey, use medical marijuana, it's awesome, I'm like, great, how much will that cost me to use it 24/7, 30 days a month, every day of the year? Because that's I'm on disability. I got a fixed income already. I can barely afford the copays of the covered medications. But to expect somebody to cover the cost of all of those things instead of getting the safe and effective medication that we know works is just insane.
Thank you for sharing that, Rose. Really quickly, a show of hands question. These are my favorite. Before we go into our break, by a show of hands, how many of you sitting here in the room believe that your chronic pain is being managed well? That you are managing your chronic pain well, whether it's with a range of what we have listed here or on the previous slide, you think that it's being managed well. So for those on the webcast, I would say about 10 hands perhaps went up. And how many of you do not believe that your chronic pain is being managed well today? Okay. Many hands. Many hands. Okay. Sure. And I do think after this we'll go for a break and then we'll come back again.
Hi, I just have a question. To me, I'm hearing everyone has legit medical diagnoses. And why is it it seems to me that when the FDA came out, or whomever decided with these new regulations came out with, okay, whoever, people are regulating things. So we have people that take drugs and they're addicts. People who don't take drugs and they're not addicts. And then what happened to the chronically ill population that truly needs the drugs for what they were made for, to block pain receptors, to do their job? It seems to me that we're just asking for our right to just have a normal life. And I don't feel that we should have to beg others for our will to live. It's not by another person's hand to dictate how my daily life goes. I don't like that. It makes me angry, and it's violating me as a mother and a person and my children.
Okay. Thank you so much. We recognize that there are mixed views on efforts from federal agencies, federal efforts, and so forth, particularly in regards to pain management. And what we're really here today, as Sharon mentioned, is to hear from all of you and hear your experiences and your perspectives so that it can really inform the work of FDA and other federal efforts as well. So with that, I do want to take a quick 12-minute break. Sorry. And we'll come back and we'll spend the rest of the afternoon discussing the barriers and challenges with access. Okay. Thank you all. Afternoon, during the large facilitated discussion, we really want to focus on a topic that's come up quite a few times already, but really the challenges and barriers to accessing your therapies to manage chronic pain. And to kickstart and kind of structure that discussion, we do have a polling question. So if I could see that, thank you, Graham. We are going to make you choose up to 3 answers for this polling question. So please think about this carefully. For the therapies that you use, what do you consider to be the most burdensome or concerning downsides? Okay. A, how the therapy is administered. B, the frequency and length of treatment. C, difficulty in accessing treatment. D, the treatment only provides minimal benefit or is effective only for a short term. F, bothersome short-term side effects of the treatment. Oh, sorry, that was E. F, concern about serious risks of the treatment. G, uncertainty about long-term effects of treatment. H, the risk of developing drug abuse and addiction. I, other downsides not mentioned. Okay, I'll give you a few moments. And our folks on the webcast, hopefully you're able to see this question and respond as well. And as we discuss the access and barriers and challenges, we will take a couple more callers. So if you'd like to provide phone comments, please call in there. We'll try to take 2 to 3 callers as well. Okay. If I could see the responses, Graham. Okay. C, 69%, difficulty in accessing treatment. That was the majority of responses for those in the room, followed by 30%, which is other downsides not mentioned. And so we'll definitely want to probe, 39%, sorry, probe more into that to see what those other downsides may be. And then a range for the other downsides that we have listed here as being burdensome or concerning as well. Okay, what do we see on the webcast, Graham?
On the web, similar, about 82% say difficulty in accessing treatment. About 50% say that the treatment only provides minimal benefit. About 30% concerns about either serious risks of treatment or the uncertainty about the long-term effects. And similarly in the room, about 35% say other downsides not mentioned.
Okay, thank you, Graham. So we'll start within the room and then we'll see what we hear from the webcast and then go to the phones last, if that sounds reasonable to folks. So in regards to difficulty in accessing treatment, could we hear a few comments perhaps on how this may be for you and how this impacts your daily life? And if it's something that we haven't heard already throughout the day, let's start with some of those comments, please. Okay, I see a microphone here.
Yeah. Work okay? I'm Richard Martin. I'm a hospital pharmacist, disabled right now. I spent 25 years working in a hospital. 4 years of that with an oncology ward. I helped consult with the oncologist on pain management, opioids, switching back and forth from IV to oral, switching medications, Dilaudid to morphine, back and forth, whatever, that type of thing. Included NSAIDs, Tylenol, antidepressants, the whole stuff. We used the WHO scale back then in the 70s and the 80s, and it was in the 90s when things got better with the long-term medications that lasted. The fentanyl patch came out, wonderful. So what I've got here, and I want to drop this off for you to pass around, this is a great big stack of comments. 60 of them are from patients that sent in their diagnosis and what was going wrong with them and everything. And the rest of them are comments from 2 different people. I challenge you, the FDA, when you get all of your comments in 860 or 900 of them that you got so far, in 2 months, I challenge you to print every single one of them off and see how high of a stack you get. So I don't know if you guys do that, print them all off and look at them, but I kind of tend to think nowadays everybody just looks at the computer screen and scrolls through them. I think if you print it off, you'll be really shocked at how big of a pile you get.
Thank you, Richard. And we do read every single one of the comments.
Good.
And I think we may be able to scan these and put them into the public docket, but if not, I may follow up with you after the meeting to make sure that you still electronically submit them just so that they're a part of the public record. One thing I do want to say about the public docket, though, is that it is public, so please don't include any personal identifying information because we don't really have the feasibility of redacting or anything that you submit to the public docket. So no social security numbers or anything else that you may not want publicly floating around. You can submit comments anonymous, but sometimes we'll have folks identify as anonymous, but then in the statement they still include their name, and so it's still out in the public. So just something to keep in mind. Sorry. Sure. Yeah, but you can definitely submit them anonymously. So thank you, Richard.
Well, we need to talk about the elephant in the room real quick and everything. That's the CDC guidelines, and you guys all know which one I'm talking about. That is the elephant in the room. And I'd like to leave this here, too. This is a letter from the CDC, from one of the top officials there. And basically, it's the one you've heard of. It's not a rule regulation. It's voluntary. It's for PCPs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm the only damn person in this country that got this letter, I think, because nobody else, none of the doctors got this, or we wouldn't be having the problems we're having with doctors. So I'd like for you guys to see this if you haven't seen it.
Okay. Thank you, Richard. Okay. And
One final thing.
Okay, one
and then
final.
I'll get off, okay? The work group members, before the guideline was presented, suggested monitoring of the guideline implications for evidence of impact and unintended consequences and modifications of guidelines when warranted by the evidence. The CDC has not been doing that I'm aware of. You give quarterly reports to the Commerce and Energy Commission. Usually it's Dr. Deborah Oury, I believe, the last time I saw one. They're not doing that. So all of these comments that you got and are going to be getting and everything are not being reported as the monitoring committee recommended. So finally,
Excuse me, while you're going through your pages, have you submitted these comments to the people on the monitoring committee as they've been identified in the CDC materials?
I've submitted all kinds of stuff to all kinds of people at the CDC.
Right, but what about the monitoring committee?
I don't know if it's specifically, the monitoring committee, I don't know if it exists anymore.
Have you sent it to the members who...
I've sent it to mainly Dr. Deborah Oury and Dr. Dowell there at the CDC, because they're the ones that have quoted that involuntary tapering is not what the CDC guidelines recommended. They both have quoted publicly that that's not what they recommended, and all across the country, that's what's happening to everybody. They're being involuntarily tapered downward off their medications, and that is just cruel wrong. And I have here and everything, 33 documented suicides because these patients were tapered involuntarily down. They have been documented by Dr. Thomas Klein and Max Lamb, so we know they're authentic. You can contact a lot of them and the family members and find out about it. I suspect the amount of suicides is considerably more across the country than we know about. So anyhow, I give you this and I'll surrender the mic.
Thank you, Richard. Sorry, one moment. We need a microphone, otherwise folks on the webcast won't be able to capture.
I like to say that I was here in January with the Opiate Policy Steering Committee, and I submitted from the same doctor, and in January that was 24. So, and that's only what we know of.
Sorry, just the microphone, if you wouldn't mind passing.
I've been cataloging suicide since 2014, and I have over 150 that I can definitely say are separate people, and over 300 screenshots where some of those may be one person being mentioned more than once or twice. But as far as the difficulty in accessing treatment, I'm one patient that the currently available treatments actually do work and have been absolutely a miracle for, but now it's become practically like winning the lottery, practically impossible to access those treatments. I'm like I keep saying this, like one of those, practically extinct white rhinoceros, the white rhinos. And I say that because I've been on a stable high dose over around 1,000 milligram MME for over 10 years, over 18 years total on opioids with no side effects, no ongoing tolerance, no problems whatsoever other than the fact that I have to live in fear of when I won't be able to find a doctor that's willing to treat me. And I'm not willing to go back to the way I was living before that. I'm not willing to do that. Back in 2015, when the doctor who had treated me for 9 years left his practice just out of being scared to death, couldn't handle the stress anymore, it was the worst thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life. I was basically just, all the progress I'd made was completely ripped away. I have not been the same since. Everything, from just pain, my blood pressure went to over 200, over 100, and stayed that way. Basically, and I used to be a registered nurse for over a month that it was like that, and I now have short-term memory problems that would make. That's just another thing, having to deal with that on top of it from having the high blood pressure, and that's verified through the neuropsych testing, and that was just. I used to drive. I don't drive anymore. I'm afraid to now because of this, and and then in the through all this, when I was just the
spasms from the dystonia were so severe that I fell in the process, and that's why my teeth are missing. You see, and that was crowns that, from having genetically just defective enamel, I had crowns, fell and knocked out, 3 of my teeth and knocked out fillings on the bottom, and basically getting dentures now. And that was over, $10,000 worth of dental work. I mean, this was the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And the only reason that I'm here now is because of Dr. Tennant. There was somebody at volunteer at my house to pick up my cat because I was done. I mean, I was just, whatever was going to happen, and someone would find me. I wasn't going to actively take my life, but I was not going to do a thing to keep myself alive, not, eat, drink, anything. And that was when we were printing out the vaccine reports for my cat, again, for him, that was when the letter from Dr. Tennant came that said he would treat me. I would not be here right now without him. And I would not be here right now without Dr. Aranda taking over for him, because basically once this, and I'll shut up in just a minute, once the letter came, when the announcement for this meeting came, I thought, well, good, I'll be able to make this before I run out of medication, now that Dr. Tennant was retiring. But, in about 2.5, 3 weeks, I would have been completely out, and this was, basically going to be the last trial. It should not be that way. I mean, I look like a completely different person. I mean, this is like a 180. This should be bravo, clap, cheer, you fixed your patient, or at least done a whole lot for them, rather than being something that's just, in threat, or in danger of losing. I mean, this is not, it's not that I've not, had multiple other things. I had an intrathecal pump put in and wound up with a incomplete spinal cord injury from that, and arachnitis.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much. Okay, we'll take one more comment, and then I do want to go to the webcast, and we have phone callers as well. And one thing that several folks touched upon, and I know Hillary wanted to speak to this as well, is the scheduling burden, especially if you have flares. And then, they were talking about how you have a flare. Oh, Lindsay, sorry, wanted to speak to that. Okay, so we'll go here, and then we'll go to Lindsay as well.
Hi, can you hear me? The thing I wanted to talk about with accessibility, right now for me, mine is fairly good because I have a pump. But between what my doctor has said and other people have said, they're pushing the pump onto people that are completely fine on pills right now. And the first time I had my pump in 2012, I got sepsis. So I don't think people should have to take these kind of risks if you're doing fine on medicine.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay. And if we could get Lindsay, I think, wanted to speak.
Sorry, I just didn't say it earlier because I'm tired, like probably everybody else is this afternoon. But I think that a huge burden and downside right now with a lot of different treatments is scheduling. I know, for me, I'm having a flare-up right now, which is not fun. And we can go in and do a nerve block for me, occipital nerve block, and it really does help. But as you guys already know, you have to make the appointment with the doctor, go see the doctor. The doctor, you will see him sitting 3 feet from you, but he really actually can't do much then. You have to put in the order, then you have to go to the insurance and have that approved, which takes how many days, and then you have to be scheduled for whatever interventional pain treatment, in my case is a nerve block, which could take weeks. And so, you're not getting relief, and in the meantime, you're having to take more medications or just not function the way that you should. And so there's a lot of just really difficult red tape right now involved with people getting effective treatments. I know for me, I really could probably come off even more medicines if I could get access to nerve blocks quicker and wasn't kind of put into that pool and waiting game. So,
thank you, Lindsay. We'll take one more comment from, I'll give the mic runner the hard task. And then I will look to the webcast after this, if that's okay.
Thank you so much. I have something really important to share. I don't know if you're aware, but pain patients are being extorted into having dangerous, invasive procedures. It's happening all over the country. Pain doctors are saying, you want your meds? Gotta go have an ESI. Guess what? The root cause of my debilitating, progressive, permanent condition is from an ESI. They are not without risk. Doctors are putting these patients at undue risk. They're harming. The first do no harm, I don't know what happened to that, but we need to get back to it because extorting patients into having procedures just in order to get meds, it's not right. Right.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that very important perspective. Okay, I am going to turn to Leela. If you could summarize what we're hearing on the web, please.
So I just want to point out that as of 2 p.m., we had over 2,000 comments through the web portal. So we apologize that we haven't been able to summarize everybody's input, but we are doing our best to read everything. In terms of challenges and barriers, I think finding a doctor that can or provide pain medication or is willing to prescribe pain medication is probably the biggest challenge. Once you find that doctor, then people mention having to go in for monthly visits, perhaps being forced into tapering, and then stress that comes when you have to go to the pharmacy and may be denied your prescription there.
Okay. Thank you so much, Leela. I do want to note for folks that while we may not be able to summarize all the webcast comments live right now, we do download all of them, and we do read through all of them and incorporate them in our summary report. So we will look at all of them again, including while we're writing our report. I do have one other question. We kind of started hearing a little bit about this, but what do you do when you can't access your preferred or optimal therapy? So we've heard of Okay, I still want to pass the mic around a little bit just so that it's captured and we have it on for the webcast. But for those of you on the webcast, in case you didn't hear, we heard suffer again and again and again. Suffer, suffer, suffer. Okay, let's take a comment from back here.
So I'm a disabled veteran.
Thank you. Thank you.
Because of injuries that I sustained while I was in the service, I have chronic pain, not just in my back, limbs. I have fibromyalgia, a whole laundry list of problems. About a year ago, I was still relatively functional. I had a job that I could go to because I had access to pain medications. With all this stuff with the CDC, my VA doctors are now refusing to prescribe the medications that they were 2 years ago. I cannot go to the pain clinic because I am currently in physical therapy for my back. So the pain clinic is where I'm supposed to get those. I'm not allowed to go. I can't take NSAID medications because I had surgery that requires new bone growth, and you can't take NSAIDs during that. So right now, what I do is I live from day to day. Right now at this exact moment, because of sitting here and being here so long, I have a blinding headache and I can't see out of my right eye. But if I went home, it was going to be the exact same. So instead, I'm staying here because I have no other options. I have no choice, and something needs to be done.
On behalf of, I'm sure, all of my FDA colleagues, I also want to thank you for your service, and then to all of you for taking the time to come here and sit through your pain to share your perspectives with us. I do want to give a chance to the callers that we have on the phone. I know that there's many. We may be able to take, let's start with 2 callers. Operator, could I have my first caller, please?
Thank you. Our first question comes from Lynette. Your line is open.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, hi, my name is Lynette, and I have been a pain sufferer for 32 years. Since I was 18, I was hit by a drunk driver who completely crushed my body, tore it to pieces, tore my leg off, and I just had multiple injuries. Spent 3 months in the hospital, and over the years, I've done every therapy, everything you can think of, the shots. I've tried every medication you can think of, And ultimately, at this point, at 50 years old, for the past at least 10, 15 years, I have added multiple other problems from overuse, they keep telling me, of the good parts of my body. So therefore, now I have just nothing but pain everywhere. And the only thing that has worked for me at this point is the opioid medication. And of course, like everyone else here, I suffer daily. I'm being reduced like everyone else, which is a terrible thing. I know so many people out there who are suffering. I hear it all the time, and I'm an advocate for these people. I've been writing in. I wrote the CDC as well. I do have to say one thing really quick. Rose, you said it all. What a wonderful, wonderful statement for everybody, and I want to thank you for that. Rosie Rose, I think it was. I really want to thank you for your comments because it's so true. We have so many barriers out there, so many things, and no doctor out there right now wants to prescribe medication. Now, I'm getting half a dose of what I should be getting. My doctor is only giving me medication because I actually went to my medical board and I fought for it, and I fought hard. And I should not have to do that as a chronic, intractable pain sufferer. I have been told I will never get better, only worse. I cannot get palliative care. They can't find it. I live in a rural area. They won't take Medicare, Medicaid. I'm permanently disabled. There is nothing anyone can do for me. They can't do spine surgery or any of those things on me because I'm so bad. My pelvic was split in half, vertical shear during the accident, and of course many other multiple injuries. And over the years, I have gotten scoliosis. I have root nerve impingement and many other things. I'm not even going to name them all. My list is like 3 pages long for my conditions. It's terrible. And there's no cure or help for me. And the only thing that works for me is the opioids. I've tried the Lyrica, the Celebrex. I had terrible reactions. I thought I was going to die. My heart was beating so fast. I thought I was having a heart attack from some of these other medications. Some of them, these are all FDA-approved medications, mind you, I have allergic reactions to. So I have allergic reactions to some of these medications, and I'm so scared to try new things when I know what works. Now, I can't take every kind of opioid or opiate because some of them make me sleepy, and I don't want to be sleepy. I want to be out of pain, and I want to be able to function and just have a life, just any kind of natural life like anyone else wants to have. I don't drink alcohol. I've tried the medical cannabis, and for me that doesn't work, other than for my nausea. But for the pain, it doesn't work. It's too intense. My pain is just on a scale of 15 out of 1 through 10, and there's nothing anyone can do for me. I've been turned away by physical therapists. They will not touch me anymore because I'm at a point now where my body is just going downhill. There's no more getting better after 32 years. There's no more getting better for me. It's only getting worse. And now, since these guidelines have come out, every doctor on the planet here thinks that these guidelines are laws, that they have to follow these laws, and they don't want to be busted by the DEA. So every single patient is being reduced in medication all the time, including intractable pain sufferers. I can't do physical therapy because they turned me away, as I said. I go to these pain clinics, and they don't know how to deal with someone in my condition so bad. I've tried the shots. They don't work. I'm back to major pain within hours, and they say it'll be 3 or 6 months, whichever shot they give me, before I can get another shot. Nothing works. And for a patient like myself and others like me, we should not have to suffer. We should have access to palliative care. I do I work with my heating pad every day. I have to lay in bed on my heating pad. I do use the naproxen. Now, the naproxen or naproxen, it does work for me for one thing and one thing only. I have a severe swelling in my pelvic and in my back, in my pelvic. And when I don't take the anti-inflammatory, that actually gets to a point where I fall out in pain and I can't move my leg, and it's really bad. So they have permanently put me on the naproxen to keep the swelling down in that part of my back and my pelvic area. I wear a prosthetic leg, but I'm not like any other amputee because my leg was slaughtered so bad. I'm missing 2 inches of bone in my femur. I have a plate and a bolt in there that's holding it in place because they did a bone graft back in '86, and it did not work. They tried to grow the 2 inches of bone. So now I have a part of my back and my it's called the iliac crest, back of my pelvic, that they chipped bone out of, that they told me wouldn't be any problem, but it hurts so bad there too, and a bunch of shards of bone inside my leg. I can't walk properly, so I walk like a penguin when I walk. And I have been nothing but strong my whole life going through this for 32 years. I do everything I can. I stretch. I've tried herbal supplements and things. Nothing else works. And when you get to a point where even your doctor says you are not going to get any better, only worse, and that I should be on palliative care, but I cannot get palliative care, then there should be something for me out there. There should be a way to get these doctors to say, okay, you are a case that needs this medication. That's what they were made for. And I hear all these stories out there, and I'm so sorry for everyone out here today. And thank you for coming, but I'm so sorry that you're suffering. I know this is hard. I've been here for hours too, laying on my heating pad, and I'm in a massive amount of pain. I could not imagine being there today.
Thank you.
I'm very grateful for all of you for being there. But I just want to say, what do you do when you get to the point where there is nothing else to be done? And then they want to tell you you're an addict, or if you request, one of the guidelines in the new addiction stuff says if they ask for a medication by name, they're an addict. Well, what if we have been on medication for 32 years, we've tried them all, and we know which medication works for us? Does that make us an addict, or does that make us a pain patient who is dependent on a particular medication that works and actually allows them to function?
Thank you.
And that's really what we need to look at here today. I'm sorry, I'm very nervous, and I've been waiting a long time, and I'm just...
Thank you so much.
A lot of people touched on a lot of things that are so true.
Thank you so much, Lynette. We're truly grateful for you taking the time to watch us via the webcast and share your comments. You may not have seen this, but there were a lot of folks in the room nodding their heads, and your comments really resonated with everyone here. So thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. With that, we will have to move. Okay, Sarah's asking me, so I'm going to have to ask you, just because we do have a full open public comment session, and we do want to go into that. So go ahead.
I promise. It's commendable, again, that the FDA is here and listening to us about the treatment strategies and outcomes and barriers our community is dealing with. You asked about, one of the things you just asked about was what happens when you can't access. And so there's a recent closing of dozens of pain clinics in Tennessee, Arkansas, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Mississippi, North Carolina, and Ohio. There will be an estimated 60,000 pain patients who have just lost access in the last week and a half to their pain care completely. Okay. These patients are some of the most complicated, infirm, and medically fragile. Within the next 30 days, you will see a new burgeoning health crisis appear. There will not only certainly include sudden death in many of these patients, but also an uptick in suicides and increase in overdose and addiction as a result. And this is sadly not the exception lately and is becoming commonplace. The truth of the matter is, and I said this before, until we have the right amount of pain specialists being able to treat, none of these strategies are going to be helpful to us at all. That's all I wanted to add.
Thank you so much. We really are out of time, and I know we have such limited time and we barely scratched the surface. And so this is where I'm really going to encourage you to please elaborate more in your comments as you submit them to the public docket, and please ask others from your community as well to share their perspectives. I do want to take this time to once again thank you all very much for participating in the meeting today. I'd like to give everyone in this room and those who called in and those on the webcast a big round of applause. Thank you so much. We truly are grateful to all of you here and on the web for so thoughtfully and courageously sharing such personal thoughts and opinions with us all today. We really admire all of you. Thank you so much. And so with that, I would like to invite Shannon to kick off our open public comment session.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shannon Woodward. I'll be moderating the open public comment session. It was great meeting some of you this morning. The purpose of this part of the meeting is to allow an opportunity for people to comment on topics other than our two main discussion topics today. This is also a chance for stakeholders other than individuals with pain or their caregivers or family members to share with us. Keep in mind that FDA won't be addressing the comments that we hear during this session, but all of the comments are being transcribed and part of the public record. We'd like this to be a transparent process, so we encourage you to note any financial interests that may be relevant to your comment. If you don't have any such interests, you may wish to state that for the record. And if you prefer not to provide this information, you can still provide your comment with us today. We've collected signups before the meeting. We have 15 speakers signed up. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to provide a comment. I don't have a timer or a buzzer like a game show. But what I will do is nudge you very kindly once you get close to the 2 minutes and just kind of urge you to wrap up to be respectful of everyone. Also, if I get to your name and you feel that you've already shared with us today and you'd like not to provide your comment, just let us know and I'll move on to the next person. So with that in mind, our first speaker is Rhonda Posey. Could you raise your hand? We could try to get a microphone to you. Rhonda Posey.
Good afternoon. My name is Rhonda Posey. I'm here as a charter member of Arachnoiditis Society for Awareness and Prevention. And although I have adhesive arachnoiditis, I speak on behalf of all chronic pain patients. We would like to express our gratitude to all those who have made today's meeting possible, and most especially the FDA Commissioner, Dr. Scott Gottlieb, for recognizing in his recent statement that appropriate access to opioids may be the only medicines that work for some patients, including those with adhesive arachnoiditis. In 2013, I had an epidural steroid injection using Kenalog 40 to treat lower back pain from a bulging disc. This resulted in a dural tear at L4-5, causing me to wake up screaming during the procedure from excruciating pain. 5 months later, I found out why my body was trying to destroy me from the inside out when I was given the horrific diagnosis of adhesive arachnoiditis. Instantly, I went from being an active member in my family, church, and community as an award-winning master gardener to struggling with pain I didn't know a human being could live through. And now it's terrifying to learn that new legislation, House Bill 5804, has been proposed to include potentially dangerous injections as a standard of care for post-surgical pain relief. Highly credible research shows the risk is so much greater for dural puncture due to the obliteration of the subarachnoid space after surgery. In 2016, Dr. Forrest Tennant began treating the underlying cause of my disease, neural inflammation.
Any final thoughts?
I'm sorry, what?
Any final thoughts?
I just wanted to add that, as Gary Snook had mentioned, with the use of a complex multimodal treatment plan, that's why I'm able to even attend. And I will end with this. Dr. Tennett's philosophy is if you treat the pain, improvement in function and quality of life will follow. And I stand before you as walking living proof. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhonda. We now have Lynn Asherraft. My apologies if I butchered your name. Lynn.
Thanks. The reason I'm here also is because of Forrest Tennant. As one of the original research subjects 28 years ago for CRPS, been here, done that. Everyone in this room who spoke has touched on things. The current issue is the fact that using the CDC guidelines as a whip to tell people they can't get access to medication is no solution to the opioid crisis. It's just hurting everybody in this room and the whole country. And at the end of the day, what I resent most is that a murderer in prison can get better access to medical care than I can as someone who's self-employed and doesn't have to worry the same about being denied medication. Because what happens to everybody when we don't get whatever our stuff du jour is, you go through withdrawal, you're sick, and you hope you don't die or lose your job in the meantime. That's what happens. And if you're lucky, before either of those two things happen, you work through the issue, your stuff comes. That was the old days. Now it's just deny, and this is a problem. So I hope that the 90 becomes a guideline in fact, which means people need care and help, rather than a hard deadline where you cut them off. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Now we have Helen Sue Walker.
I'm going to try to stand out of the way of the camera. Hi, I'm Sue Walker. I'm a chronic pain patient, and I'm the president of the Richmond Fibromyalgia and Chronic Pain Association. We are also a small organization with very little money, so I have no financial interests here. Thank all of you for allowing so many of us to be here today to speak about our experiences and concerns. And thank you to all the courageous people who came out today, many of you in pain, to share your stories. I've been moved to tears more than once today, and it's just so important that your voices be heard. Like many others here, I have a laundry list of pain issues that I won't go through. I'd like to add to all the good information already presented that respectfully, I believe the FDA and most everyone and every agency tasked with battling the so-called opioid crisis, which as others have said is more accurately called a street drug crisis, a fentanyl crisis, are going about it from the wrong end of the spectrum. Pain patients aren't and never were the driving the crisis. We're just the low-hanging fruit for politicians, others, and with all the restrictions, opioid-related deaths would be decreasing, while the reality of that is that they're still increasing. If we were the problem, that wouldn't be what was happening. We need to address the root causes of addiction, including finding the genetic markers that render many of us able to safely take prescribed pain medication for many years without becoming addicted or constantly increasing our dosage, while a small number of people may take a small amount of narcotic pain meds for a brief time and will be driven to seek more and still more to feed an addiction. Out of the purview of your agency, although it shouldn't be as it's directly connected, are the very real society issues such as poverty that drive the addiction crisis.
Thank you, Helen. Any final thoughts?
Yes, we need partnerships to study and address the underlying causes of addiction rather than punishing those who suffer from it. Treat them, don't arrest them.
Thank you so much. Next we have Sandra Flores.
Hi. Just a small little tidbit about me. I fundraised to get here. I'm out of work now for the past 2 years. I was an ER nurse for 17 years, active, loved my life, and it was pulled from me just like that. I had back pain, and then I found out the adhesive arachnoiditis. We don't know where, how, when, or what. I'm losing everything from the waist down slowly but surely, and it's progressing fast. In 2 years, the way I've seen the medical field act the way they act is an embarrassment to who I thought we were. The entire 17 years I was there, faithfully giving back to the community and literally giving my life to give to others, letting my kids be home without me during holidays as I helped people. And I'm being literally turned away. Not one doctor yet, one in 2 years, has accepted me as a patient because I am, quote, unquote, a liability to them. That is the truth. I am being thrown out with the trash. I am worth more than that. Something needs to change. I have a diagnosis that would be, that I'm dying. I also have an autoimmune disease because of the adhesive arachnoiditis that's eating all my organs thinking that they're foreign. So I can't get on hospice yet because I'm not ready yet, which I'm wishing to be ready, but so I have to wait and then nobody will treat me. I just can't even think anymore. Just please give me my life back. Whoever you know, whoever can do it, just give me my life back. That's all I'm asking, to be able to shower myself, to be able to walk more than 20% of my day. And just, this took 4 hours right here. I get up and it takes me a 2-hour regimen just to get out of bed of medicines. I don't take narcotics.
Thank you, Sandra. Any final thoughts?
It takes 4 hours for me to get dressed. And I've learned how to get dressed really well laying on my side. And that's all.
Thank you, Sandra. We now have Thorna Klein. Thorna, or maybe it's Thomas. Sorry, I'm struggling with. Thank you, thank you.
It's all my in-laws. We're in the worst healthcare crisis that I've seen in 40 years, and probably the worst healthcare crisis in the history of the United States. We not only have people killing themselves, we have 5 to 6 million people just like these who are being tapered. So how do we deal with this? Well, I'm standing before the only regulatory agency with rulemaking for prescription drugs. Nobody else can do that. What I'm suggesting you do is a trick I learned in Boston. Medicaid was having problems with drug representatives talking doctors into prescribing $1,000 a month drugs. So what do? They sent out a counter detailing force that followed the detailers to the doctor's office, and they said, hey, wait a minute, this is the real straight skinny. I'm suggesting that FDA make its own manual. Not a 100-page manual from the VA, not a 50-page manual from the CDC, which incidentally had no indications for opiates. None. Make your own manual like you would a label. These are the indications. These are the side effects. These are the good things about the medication. And it might be an interesting thing to take input from other people. I have 20,000 people on Twitter, and I ask them questions, and they give me answers. And that's something you guys can do and develop a Wikipedia kind of manual use of opiates in acute and chronic pain. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Kristen Ogden. Kristen Ogden.
Thank you. This time I'm speaking as the co-founder and co-leader of Families for Intractable Pain Relief. I will tell you very quickly that Families for Intractable Pain Relief is comprised of patients, and family members of Dr. Forrest Tennant. You've heard him mentioned a number of times. There are 9 families represented here out of his 150 patient population from 8 states. This was that important for us to be here. We, last month, had the opportunity to meet with members of FDA's professional affairs and stakeholder engagement staff, and we presented a specific recommendation that we think provides a reasonable solution that could be implemented quickly, perhaps under FDA's emergency regulatory authority to start. There's an urgent need to establish a certification and registration program that would authorize trained physicians to treat severe intractable pain as needed without restrictions on opioid dosing or duration of care, and without restrictions on non-oral routes of administration or off-label use of non-opioid medications. This regulation should recognize that such treatment as authorized would be authorized exceptions to dose limits or thresholds imposed by CDC, Department of Justice, DEA, Medicare, state laws and guidelines, and insurers. Registration program would authorize the filling of controlled drug prescriptions written by certified physicians across state lines, and it would protect certified physicians from malpractice suits or other liability, provided the patient has consented in writing to non-standard care. It's our position that freedom from pain to the extent achievable is a fundamental human right. And the withdrawal of readily available, effective pain relief is essentially torture. Our government is torturing its citizens. We're allowing torture of citizens who have done nothing wrong. And when it continues and continues and continues, despite
Thank you. Any
the
final
input
thoughts?
from individuals, it gets pretty close to homicide. And I mean that, and I hate to say it, but I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I thank the FDA for its interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Gary Snook.
Thank you. I testified before the FDA in 2014 about the pain that I suffer after I was given an injection intrathecally of Depo-Medrol and developing adhesive arachnoiditis, that pain was beyond all human comprehension. And as a pain patient, I think I can speak for almost everybody here when I say that I feel like a Jew in the Warsaw Ghetto with no place to run and no place to hide. What I didn't tell you at that 2014 meeting is that I am an outlier. I suffer from a genetic variation called the CYP450-239 that makes me metabolize opioids quite quickly, as well as prevents any other modalities from working. And so I take a dose that is several times higher than the CDC guideline because I'm a rapid metabolizer. Now, when patients like me are forced into a taper to the new guideline or are dropped entirely by our doctors who, quite frankly, are terrified to treat people like me, we die. Just like my friend Jennifer Adams, who is a highly decorated police officer in Montana, who shot herself in the head after the DEA raided her doctor's office, leaving her the love of her life behind her 12-year-old son.
Thank you so much for sharing, Gary. Do you have any final thoughts
I
for
do.
us?
I do. And so on top of all of this, Montana has seen a 38% increase in their suicide rate, on top of leading the nation in suicide rates in 2014. And most of this is because pain patients cannot get treatment there. Only end-of-life counseling and epidural steroid injections.
Thank you. Now we have Charity Caldwell. Charity Caldwell.
I'm trying to find my piece of paper because I did have, I know, like I brought up the kratom, and I know that this is not just about that in any way, but it's what has worked for me for the chronic pain. And I do know the FDA's thoughts about kratom. It's been in the news quite a bit. And I have a little bit of a different kind of mindset when it comes to my opinion about kratom than even many of the organizations that are here to represent the community as a whole. And I did meet the first or the second week of June, I did meet with Senator Grassley's aide and as well as Senator Feinstein's as part of a week-long time that I was here. And in Senator Grassley's office, they specifically told my friend that was with me at that time that we needed to get an appointment with the FDA, and we have tried numerous times through emails to request appointments, and we haven't been able to. So this is kind of the only way that I can say what was so different about what we talked about. And what sets it apart is I understand the scheduling and I understand the concern because it is unknown. It's been studied for over 15 years, or at least 13 and a half years, I know, by Dr. Christopher McCurdy. And I understand there was a computational model done by the FDA, but it doesn't show what the science has shown in the labs. And so my biggest concern is to make sure that everybody is kept safe. And I feel most comfortable with being able to have access to raw leaf kratom. I think that because in traditional use, it is a
Thank you,
tea leaf.
Charity. Any final thoughts for us?
Yes, I believe that it should be regulated as a food product with the extracts made as a Schedule II, so they can continue to be researched for potential medical uses by the community who's already studying them. But I do believe plain leaf kratom should be a food product so it can ensure that it's safely handled and packaged for people to have access to as a tool in the toolbox.
Thank you, Charity. Now we have Kelly Devine. Kelly Devine. Is Kelly here?
I have a terrible social anxiety, so pardon me if I stutter. My name's Kelly Devine. I suffered debilitating fibromyalgia, multiple joints problems, as you can tell. At one time, I was prescribed 13 medications, side effects of which left me miserable, in pain, unstable, unable to function, and suicidal. About 4 years ago, I began to research natural remedies after I felt the medical field failed me with their prescribed medications. That's when I learned about making an herbal tea from dried kratom leaves. Kratom is a tree that grows in Southeast Asia. It's the same scientific it's in the same scientific family as coffee and has been used for centuries in that part of the world without a single death ever occurring. Also in Thailand, they have removed kratom and cannabis from the Schedule I list, and that just passed in Thailand. While kratom does not cure or treat my medical conditions, it does help greatly with my pain, relaxation, and sleep difficulties. I've never experienced negative side effects except for extreme thirst. It makes you drink a lot more water. I have been consuming kratom for almost 4 years. My quality of life has improved. I suffer less pain. There are at least 5 to 7 million kratom consumers in the U.S. The number is growing. I'd also like to point out that my Facebook group is just a group I made up, and we started out with Kratom United. In 2 years, we had 2,000 members, so that's 1,000 members per year. After the CDC regulations
Any final thoughts for us?
Yes, ma'am. Since the CDC regulations, our members shot up 5,000 people in less than 12 months. And I think that says a lot about what's happening to the American chronic pain sufferers. Thank you. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kelly. Now we have Grace Cabalin. Grace Cabalin.
Thank you. It's actually Grace Caballero.
Oh, thank you.
Full disclosure, I am an employee of New Vector Medical. New Vector offers spinal cord stimulators for the management of chronic intractable pain, but I am here today as a patient. I was injured in 1995 while serving in the military, and I am fortunate that my pain is managed with a spinal cord stimulator. That wasn't always the case, unfortunately. I was injured in 95. I suffered for many years before spinal cord stimulation was offered to me, and I would like for the promotion of alternative therapies, for that to be offered to patients as well. Opioids did not work for me, and I know that they work for many of you, and I'm glad that they do. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case for me, and that's not the case for many other people. So we need to have alternatives and access to those alternatives. I've been a patient advocate for over 10 years, and I've had the honor of speaking to literally thousands of patients seeking relief. And in answer to some of the questions that have been posed today regarding suicide, many of them have told me in our conversations that if the spinal cord stimulator hadn't worked for them, or if it's not going to work for them, they were going to commit suicide. Many of them had attempted suicide. Also, the impact it has on their families as well. Many of them were angry because they weren't given any information about alternatives. They also suffered for many years before being offered something other than opioids. So
Thank
just
you,
something
Grace. Any final thoughts for us?
No, thank you. Just one final thought. Just keep that in mind that there are alternatives. If the opioids work, that's great, but offer something else as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Steve Chang. Steve Chang.
Open. No. I'm Steve Chang. I'm from New York. I'm an acupuncturist and a massage therapist. Currently, there are 3 bills in Congress waiting to pass to allowing the acupuncture as the treatment method for the people. Okay, so we need your support, and especially the FDA. Okay, because the acupuncture is most efficient handling the pain issues. I heard that today's many people are saying about their pain. Okay, but from the way I see is probably your pain is because of when you for example, like an accident causing the pain, causing the lower back pain, but because of you didn't get the proper treatment, and you didn't take the proper action, so that's why you are suffering, and then the situation getting worse, and then you ending out with looking for the opiate for the pain relief. And pain relief using the opiates is not a solution. It's just temporary cover your symptoms. So we should looking for the solution, find out what really caused the pain, and address it. And then the acupuncture and also massage therapy.
Thank you, Steve. Any final thoughts for us today?
Okay, so since the time limit, all right, I'm just urging that everybody we can support these 3 bills to pass, to allowing the federal the Medicare and the Medicaid, and also the health insurance for the veteran, to accept the acupuncture as the treatment method.
Thank you, Steve. Next we have Yam Fan. Yam Fan.
I represent my the patient Lisa Wood. He's 40 years old now. When he's 17 years old, he had a shoulder surgery. After surgery, he back started in a chronic pain, but I didn't know why. After 10 years later, they finally diagnosed spinalis, a immune disease. He pain every day, and span fused together gradually. Also, it loses the range of motion much. For the problem, he take anti-inflammation pill and a painkiller and anti-immune function pill every day. Because of medication side effect, his liver function missed out too. After 5 years of son, boy, diagnosed with children arthritis. Then he started coming to see me. After, take his son 2 years later, his son is better. He don't want his son take medicine. Then I asked his condition. Recommend he do acupuncture for his back problem. Actually, he tell me he got acupuncture before and the dry needling from PT. Just a little help. I explained, that my skill different from before he had.
Thank you so much. Any final thoughts for us?
Yeah, he's got much better this year. Last month he traveled 2,000 miles from Virginia to Alabama, Texas, Florida, back to Richmond. Then he didn't feel like before. He got much pain, so he's really happy. He wanna tell people, but the strange people didn't believe her. Actually, acupuncture is a good solution for most chronic pain, but not for everyone. But most,
Thank you.
Okay.
Next, we have Terry Lewis.
Members of the panel, I want to introduce you to the experts in the room. They're right here. These people know more about what you have to do than you do. Okay? I am a care partner. I am a social scientist. I'm a clinical educator. I believe in data. And I believe that we are talking about the wrong set of questions. If we want to know how to better address the questions that are before us today, we have to have regular input. We have to widen our stance, not narrow it. Regression to the mean is killing us. Okay? We need to look at all the data. The thing that has been flowing through our conversation today is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. That's a really important piece of information for us. We can't medicate that away, but we can prevent a lot of injury if we understand that. In my own family, we're finding out that that's a real issue. It's more common than we think we understand. Opiates help, but prevention is the key. I have been surveying and talking to patients for 5 years intensively because I am the parent of a young man whose natural history I have followed up to the point where he's 35 years old.
Thank you, Terry. Any final thoughts for us?
Yes. I would like to see FDA institute regular communication with patients and regularly begin to document what is being suggested and what there is to learn and to change the way we ask questions about this process.
Thank you, Terry. Now we have Amanda Proctor. Amanda Proctor.
Hi, my name is Amanda Proctor. I'm representing Cauda Equina Foundation with about 2,000 members and growing of Cauda Equina syndrome patients. Cauda Equina syndrome is a spinal nerve root injury of the lumbar spine. It is very similar to arachnoiditis in its chronic stage, but if it's caught in the first 48 hours and treated, if it's a treatable cause, not all causes are treatable, it can be completely reversed. Unfortunately, it's misdiagnosed 85% of the time, which is something we're working on, but that's not why we're here today. We're here today because 85% of the time, Cauda equina syndrome progresses to chronic Cauda equina syndrome, again, very similar to arachnoiditis, with periods of neuroinflammation which cause flare-ups. This obviously causes intractable pain and periods of acute on chronic pain, something that we've mentioned where you have your normal pain and then you have your flare-up. So we have members that are saying, I've just stopped going to doctors. They can't help me. They don't listen to me. They treat me like a criminal. They treat me like an addict. That's what I'm hearing from 2,000 people. I have people that I have had emergency phone calls at 2 o'clock in the morning. Hey, we have a member talking about suicide on the support group. Can you call them? Can you intervene? Now, I am a licensed healthcare professional. I do not practice because I physically cannot, but I am legally obligated to intervene and report suicidal ideology.
Thank you, Amanda. Any final thoughts?
We have to do better at treating pain. We have to have better treatments. We have to listen to our patients. We have to have empathy and compassion. And if we don't have that, hang up the white coat and get out of the practice.
Thank you. Next, we have Adrian Hugh Bergman. My apologies if I mispronounced.
Hi, I'm Adrienne Fu-Berman. I'm a physician and I'm director of Farmed Out, which is a Georgetown University Medical Center project, research and education project that examines inappropriate pharmaceutical marketing tactics. My plea to the FDA is to please do more to combat pharmaceutical company influence in drug approval. Remember OxyContin and the fact that the FDA allowed the original label to imply that the formulation was thought to be less addictive. More recently, abuse deterrent formulations, a marketing term that should never have been allowed, has really created a lot of harm. 46% of healthcare providers think abuse deterrent formulations mean they are less addictive. They are not less addictive. They're only slightly less convenient to turn into an injectable form. In terms of chronic opioid use, they are appropriate for some pain patients, including many in this room, but there are many others for whom it is not appropriate. We continue to overprescribe opioids in this country, and opioids continue to be overpromoted. In 2016, 1 out of 5 Americans received an opioid, and 1 out of 12 physicians received payments from an opioid manufacturer. Pain does not protect patients from opioid overuse disorder. And even beyond opioid use disorder, opioids can increase cardiovascular risks and suppress the immune system, among other problems.
Any
they are
final
appropriate
thoughts,
for
Adrian?
some things. Yes, just to say that there's been some attacking of the CDC guidelines here. They're actually very rational. I just wanted to read one thing, which is, who would disagree with this statement? Clinicians should consider opioid treatment only if expected benefits for both pain and function are anticipated to outweigh risks to the patient.
Thank you, Adrian. I'm now going to turn it over to Dr. Sharon Hertz for our closing remarks.
Hi all. Thank you for those of you who've been able to stick out this very long day. I know those chairs are not necessarily the most comfortable, and plus all that you went through to get here. Appreciate that effort. Like I said this morning, your comments are incredibly important to us. So in addition to what we've heard today, we're going to be reviewing all of the comments that go to the docket. And in addition, there'll be a report from this meeting that's ultimately made available on our website as well. I just want to mention a couple of things that we're trying to do to help. We have been writing the new opioid REMS, the Risk Evaluation Mitigation Strategy. which requires manufacturers not to create educational programs, but to fund them from accredited CME providers, so they have no input in the content. We have created the blueprint. The blueprint has been changed from the original, which focused on how to use the drugs, to a more comprehensive approach to pain management. And that's what's expected in those educational programs. There's also ongoing federal efforts that will hopefully be helpful, acknowledging that we have to be extremely careful to avoid unintended consequences. I just want to mention that one of these efforts is the Pain Management Best Practices Interagency Task Force, which was established and mandated by the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act, known as CARA, of 2016. The task force will propose updates and recommendations to address gaps or inconsistencies in pain management best practices. The task force includes a broad spectrum of stakeholders, including patients, physicians, and experts in pain research, as well as others. We had the inaugural meeting in May. I represent our agency on this task force. And that meeting featured patient perspectives as well as public comments early on in the proceedings. When the task force completes its development, the proposed updates and recommendations, they'll be available for public comment. So we're trying to do what we can to help. Thank you once again. For now, put all comments into the docket, and if other things arise and you need to contact us, there's a variety of ways to do that, including emailing our drug information people. They provide me or others with comments directly, and it's a way to have a central focus for any kind of input from patients outside. So thanks again, safe and hopefully comfortable travels home. I can touch base with you offline, but basically I was describing a task force that was mandated by legislation that took place in 2016, but I'll catch up with you.